Imagine your soul child, your pride and delight, being torn away from your arms, not by disease, not by accident, but by the deliberate action of someone else. And when you look to the legal system, the same system that guarantees fairness and protection, it fails to function as you had wished. Justice seems far away. The process seems a long time coming, and the suffering, it never goes away. What's the course of action? The story of Marianne Bachmeier, German homemaker whose modest, unassuming existence was exemplified in the city of Lübeck in the late 1970s and early 1980s. She wasn't rich, she wasn't famous, she was only a single mom, struggling to provide for her lovely daughter Anna. But that all changed in 1981. In an instant that would astonish not only Germany, but the entire world. Marianne made a decision in a courtroom, not due to hatred, but due to unrestrained sorrow, despair, and heartbreak. She confronted the man who had taken Anna's life in a way nobody would have ever expected. And with that single act, Marianne Bachmeier became a symbol. It's a symbol for mourning, for justice, and what occurs when a mother is pushed to her breaking point. But Marianne's story didn't start there. What took place in court that day was merely the tip of something much deeper. For she was a woman who had suffered more pain before the public learned her name than most would have endured in a lifetime. She lost not just her beloved daughter Anna, she had had 2 children before Anna, but their lives had taken a course no one could have foreseen, and few discuss them today. And before motherhood, her own childhood was filled with trauma and emotional neglect. We're not here today just to discuss what occurred before the court. We're going deeper into Marianne's past, her pain, her suffering, and the series of events that led her to take a stance that made front-page headlines across the globe. And we'll investigate how the justice system in Germany during the period could have let it gradually build up to a boiling point. There is more to this than a story about a crime. Here is the story of a mother. Marianne Bachmeier was born on the 3rd of June 1950 in West Germany, 5 years following the end of the Second World War. Her war-weary parents were part of a generation, traumatized emotionally and psychologically by the war. They had fled East Prussia and found shelter within the idyllic and tranquil town of Sarstedt, near Hildesheim, Lower Saxony. And even though the war had finally ended, its emotional impact lingered, and Marianne's own childhood was far from peaceful. She was brought up in a stringent traditional household, one based firmly on the conventions of religion. Her parents' home outwardly could appear moral and stable. Behind the doors, however, was a far different picture. Her father was a strict autocratic individual, a child of the war years' military training, having served in the Waffen. It was not his history alone, though, that haunted his household like a specterate, was his attitude. He drank habitually. He would sit for hours upon hours at the local bar near their house. And whenever he drank, he was not only distant, he was aggressive and volatile. Home was anything but a place where Marianne could find security or comfort. It was a place where emotions were stifled, where love was a luxury and she was generally overlooked. Her parents' marriage also failed and they got separated, yet even that gave her no relief. Her mother married once more, and her new spouse, Marianne's stepfather, instituted a new kind of domination. She would eventually describe him as dictatorial, severe to the extent of being cruel. He didn't guide her, he judged her, and her mother, instead of protecting her, grew increasingly distant. Her parents saw her as being volatile, obstinate, and unpredictable by the time she was a teenager. She was obliged at last driven away altogether too soon. Still barely more than a child herself, left on her own and unsupported, Marianne's situation was soon worsened. At the young age of 16, she got pregnant for the first time, homeless and on her own, with no support system to guide her. She made the agonizing choice of putting the child up for adoption. Just when Marianne was beginning to build a fragile existence with her boyfriend at the age of 18, something terrible happened. She became pregnant again, but before the child was born, she was the victim of a violent assault, an experience that shattered the small sense of stability she had. When she gave birth to the baby, Marianne took the heart-wrenching decision of giving the baby up for adoption. It was not an easy or irresponsible choice, it was a desperate one, a fearful one, and one of hope that her child would do better in the care of another. This was her second child that she had relinquished, and for Marianne, it was another aspect of an already abandoned, rejected, and loss-tainted existence. Each chapter of her young adult life seemed to replay the same hurtful pattern, that love, security, and acceptance were somehow always just out of reach. Marianne had moved to Lübeck during the 1970s and was working in a bar called Tapasa, where she met and fell for the bar manager. And Marianne was pregnant for the third time when she was just 22 years old in 1972. This time, though, it was different. She gave birth to a daughter on November 14, 1972. Her name was Anna. For the first time, Marianne decided to keep her child. Anna was no longer just a daughter, she was a symbol of hope, a second opportunity. But single motherhood was not always straightforward. Marianne worked late shifts behind the bar to keep the pair afloat, and frequently she had no option but to take Anna along with her. It was no oddity for Anna to sleep on a bench or a back bedroom when her mother worked late into the evening. At times, when the sun came up and Marianne had finally arrived home, she would sleep the day away, leaving Anna alone. Friends and acquaintances would later describe the girl, Anna, as a smart and lively girl who tended to appear older than she was. Others accused her of turning her into a little adult and wanting her to be tough and emotionally mature. Anna learned early how to do things for herself. She was older than her years, but at a cost. Marianne was highly aware of the problems within her lifestyle. At one point, she even considered giving Anna up for adoption, believing that some other family could offer her child a more stable existence. But she didn't. She held on. For in the midst of the turmoil, the strife, the sleepless nights, and silent regretana was everything to her. And even that relationships, strong as it was, would be tested eventually under the most tragic of circumstances soon. What neither of them was aware was that their time was slipping away, and the suffering which Marianne had worked so fiercely to bury for so long was going to return in a manner no one could have possibly imagined. Anna Bachmeier was 7 years old as of 1980. She was developing rapidly intelligent, vivacious, and feisty. Yet, as with every child brought up under a single working parent with a long work schedule, there were also instances of rebellion and agitation. A small argument with her mother on the 5th of May 1980 was the turning point. There was a brief mother-daughter battle that morning, as there often was within a lot of households. But instead of going to school, Anna made a decision that would alter the course of their lives forever. She cut class. She didn't just walk the streets alone. Anna visited a place she had visited numerous times before. House she was familiar with, she visited Klaus Grabowski, a local resident. He was 35 years old and had a house she had visited before. He had cats, and since most children are, Anna was drawn to animals. It was harmless on the surface, anyway, but what she was unaware was that Grabowski had a dark and sinister history. He had already been convicted on serious child crimes and had already served the time for them. He had even had a voluntary medical procedure years earlier that was designed to render him incapable of hurting anyone else. Then he had sought treatment. Afterwards, to reverse addressing some serious questions as to his stability and intentions, the unthinkable happened that May Day when Anna visited him at home. He kept her captive for hours within his house. What occurred there during those hours brings pain and indignation even to this day. In attempting to silence Anna and escape punishment, he made a fatal decision. Rather than risk her being imprisoned or jailed, he took her life. He placed her body into a box and left it on a canal, hidden and abandoned. Yet, no longer was the heinous crime kept secret. His fiancée, shocked at what had happened, called the police and reported him. She cooperated with the inquiry and led the authorities to where the body of Anna had been discarded. As a result of her courage, the issue came to light easily, and Grabowski was arrested. When questioned, Grabowski indicated he was afraid of returning to prison. He had insisted that he acted out of panic and that he had told her he was going to tell her mother what happened between them. But to everyone, his reasons didn't count since the outcome was unthinkable. The information was terrible for Marianne. Her world that she had worked so desperately to construct anew, with Anna collapsed all around her instantly. All her own agony of a shattered youth. All the effort she had drawn on raising her own child on her own came crashing on her. She was everything to her mother. She was her salvation, her sole family, her reason for existing. And that cause was no longer. The investigation went quickly. The evidence was compelling, and the country watched, horrified, not only by the crime, but by the breakdown of a system meant to safeguard a child who was never meant to be within proximity of someone like Grabowski. The trial fascinated Germany, but to Marianne, it was more than a headline. It was her nightmare, her grief, and her truth, something much more profound than the public could ever really comprehend. And what the public did not know was that Marianne's story was not over. And as the trial of Klaus Grabowski started, she made a choice, one that reverberated through history and ignited a controversy that still rages today. As the trial approached in the weeks prior, Marianne Bachmeier observed closely as the legal proceedings went on. She had placed her faith in the justice system, hoping it would speak for her daughter and deliver the maximum punishment to the man who took her life. But what she witnessed left her feeling speechless and helpless. The slow pace of the process, the legal technicalities, and the possibility of her daughter's voice getting lost in technicalities. All of them added up to make Marianne feel intensely frustrated. To her, it was not justice, it was procedure. She worried that the man who had took her daughter's life would escape the full blame-through loopholes in the law or mercy. The thought that he could walk free someday, but Anna was lost forever, became too much for him to handle. And so, on the morning of the 6th of March 1981, a change occurred within Marianne. She made a decision, not driven by law, but by pain, grief, and an inescapable perception that the system put in place to protect her child already had failed. At the district court in Lubeck, the trial had already begun. Witnesses were being interrogated, and the suspect accused of killing Anna was just a couple of meters away from the judge. Marianne Bachmeier quietly entered the courtroom that morning. She came without lawyers, affidavits, or entourage. She came alone, with a little handbag, just like a normal person. But within that handbag, there was a revolver. She did not wait, she did not sit. The instant she had stepped into the courtroom, Marianne had pulled out the revolver and shot 7 bullets at Klaus Grabowski. 6 bullets hit him. He was killed instantly. The courtroom exploded. Gasps, shouts, a wave of panic and confusion inundated the room as security guards rushed to take control of the situation. But Marianne didn't run away. She didn't resist. She let herself be taken away without a struggle. It was all over within seconds. And so too, overnight, was the once reticent, widowed mother, Marianne Bachmeier, turned into a household name in the history of modern German law. The courtroom was suddenly the theater for what no one could have foreseen. No tantrum, no staged confrontation. Something more than that. Something created out of pain, out of loss, and a loss no court process could ever restore. Her choice would divide a nation. To everyone else, it was a crime. To some, it was the ultimate sacrifice of a mother pushed beyond the limits of human tolerance. Whatever the people believed, one thing was certain: Germany would not recall the name Marianne Bachmeier. Ever since Marianne Bachmeier fired those shots in the courtroom, the tale burst into Lubeck. Suddenly, an extremely personal loss became a national conversation. Throughout Germany and, soon the world, many were confused as to what had occurred. Was Marianne a criminal or a desperate mother pushed to the limits of unbearable sorrow? The news media soon covered the incident. The headlines questioned the limits of justice and vengeance. Talk shows, the radio, and the press discussed whether Marianne's behavior was unacceptable or reasonable. For some, Marianne was a symbol of visceral human emotion, a mother pushed beyond what it was possible for a human being to endure. Her grief was shared by numerous families who had similarly lost or been persecuted. Meanwhile, others were concerned about the consequences of taking the law into one's own hands. They feared that if all reacted to personal pain or fury, society itself would fall apart. The system was heavily condemned. There were questions about how a repeat offender, such as Klaus Grabowski, was able to stay at large. Was the tragedy preventable? Should the courts have moved more quickly or acted otherwise? Marianne's case spawned a heated debate on the issues of justice, clemency, and the nature of emotion within Luschus, which remain relevant today. Despite differing opinions, one truth united many. No one could really decide what it was like to lose a child in such a violent way, or the intensity of the pain that followed. For Marianne, it was a shock. She was thrust into the limelight unexpectedly, under the weight of sorrow, guilt, and expectation of understanding. When Marianne Bachmeier came before the court, her case was immediately turned into one of the most highly publicized cases of vigilante justice in the nation. Eventually, Marianne published her personal history with a well-known news magazine and got compensated for it, which allowed her to cover the huge sum of the attorney's fees she had incurred. Such understanding of her personal turmoil made the general public realize the loss and suffering which propelled her into action. During the time that Marianne was in custody, many individuals sent her messages of encouragement, flowers, and presents, indicating that they cared about her sorrow and empathized with what she had done. In their eyes, for her, she was no defendant, but a mother grieving the loss of her child. But the public opinion was far from unanimous. Others held firmly the view that regardless of the intensity of pain, the law had to be obeyed, and there could never be tolerance for vigilantism within a constitutional state. They worried that approving the actions would pull the pillars of justice asunder. As more about Marianne's history was revealed, like that she had given her first 2 children up for adoption, some individuals' opinions shifted. She no longer represented the image of an innocent victim, and so the public's feelings towards her became more complicated. But most still had a lot of empathy and understanding for her tough decisions. The case also generated sharp criticism of the justice system. Concerns were raised about how a previously convicted offender was present without appropriate supervision, especially given the nature of past charges. Far more alarming was the element that the therapies that had repressed his desires had been reversed by Grabowski. This led to anguished questioning of whether the authorities did everything possible to prevent catastrophe. Marianne's story reminded the nation to consider where justice and mercy and human feeling intersect, and where the law often struggles with the nuances of tragedy and loss. Marianne Bachmeier's courtroom shooting was tried in a highly publicized trial that captivated the country. She was officially charged with murder on the 2nd of November, 1982. The charge was unexpected under the circumstances, but the law must take its course. Throughout the duration of the trial and the weeks that followed, the courts attentively considered the defense's arguments and the facts. Her attorneys maintained that she had done it without premeditation, but had been overcome by an overwhelming surge of emotional hurt and grief. After almost a month of hearings, on March 2, 1983, the court issued its ruling. The murder charge was abandoned, but Marianne was convicted for manslaughter and unauthorized possession of a firearm. The judges were able to appreciate the emotional turmoil that drove her into committing the offense and accounted for it during sentencing. She was given 6 years imprisonment, which was deemed a lenient sentence considering the gravity of the offense. Marianne spent 3 years behind bars, her own imprisonment a richly developed chapter within a book, already impacting so many others on a deep level. Her case was a milestone case raising the hard questions on justice, mercy, and the boundaries of the law when confronted with brutal human suffering. 3 years in jail later, Marianne Bachmeier returned to a world that had been watching her every move for years. She got married to a teacher in 1985, and the two of them moved a great distance away from Germany to Nigeria. A few years later, where her husband worked as a teacher for a German school among a local expatriate community. However, the marriage did not last. They divorced in 1990, and Marianne relocated back to Europe, settling in Sicily. There, she worked as a hospice aide in Palermo, taking care of the sick and the elderly, far removed from the public eye she was used to. In Sicily, she was waging a new personal battle as well. She had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The illness led her back to Germany ultimately, and there she spent the rest of her years. With the passing years, Marianne's tale continued to attract attention. In 1994, 13 years after the court shooting, she gave a remarkable and reflective interview on the Deutschlandfunk radio station, speaking freely and sharing her thoughts with the world. The same year, she penned her autobiography, giving a glimpse into her tumultuous and troubled life, the pain, the sadness, and the tough decisions she had made. Marianne spoke publicly on a TV interview in 1995 on the shooting of Klaus Grabowski. Her actions were justified as the result of deliberation, a painful choice made with a view to rendering justice the only way she was capable, and to prevent future desecration of her child's memory. Marianne Bachmeier's life was characterized by suffering, bravery, and tough choices. She passed away in 1996 after a battle with pancreatic cancer at the age of 46. Both she and her daughter Anna were buried together within the Bergdorf Cemetery located within Lübeck, a serene place where mother and child remained together forever in memory. The Marianne Bachmeier case was a heartbreaking reminder of what can occur if a justice system is not protecting the most vulnerable among us. A just and reasonable system of justice is the cornerstone of every society it has, to make sure that the criminal is punished for their offenses before they can cause further harm. If the system had functioned as it was designed, then perhaps the victim in this case, Anna Bachmeier, might still be with us today, and a grieving mother would never have been compelled to take the law into her own hands. It's a stark reminder that innocent life and real justice should always be the very top priority.